All right. Really appreciate everybody being here with us today for our next performance school. Really appreciate Andy Ryland from USA Football for joining us just through what we normally do with our performance school. As far as reminders, I think for everybody that's working with some different athletes across campus, one of the things we need to just keep in mind is that some of the first rounds of tests and quizzes are coming up, some different assignments are due. So just understanding that everything impacts what our athletes are doing. So just keep that in mind when we're planning, when we are designing practice and training opportunities, but also just reinforcing just general things like hygiene and just being clean and taking care of yourself. As far as our performance school, a reminder that, we're trying to create a performance community across the Penn State system. We have 20 Penn State universities across the state of Pennsylvania. And by creating a network, both live here in person, but also sharing information, we'll certainly become stronger over time. If you look at high performance groups that we have, like within our sports performance group, there's 4 defining characteristics that really help drive that mission. First is we want to always prioritize athletes as the main center point. We do that, keep every decision that we do are centered around the athlete. We're going to be going in the right way. Okay. 2, we want to make sure that communication is a massive priority. Over communicating, both listening and talking, but also being proactive. We won't ever over communicate too much. So making sure everybody's on the same page and that everybody knows the plan. Okay, that leads to the next one is making sure that we emphasize planning and evaluation. We don't want our plans to be so rigid that we can't adjust over time, but we do need a plan. We need to be able to evaluate that plan and be like water and adjust over time. And then finally, this speaks to this group here, is we want to establish a learning organization. That's within the Penn State ICA, but that's also across campus. Professionals like Dr. Shinbo, Christine joining us. A lot of different people have weighed in on these conversations, and that is a part of our learning organization. So just another plug also for this is where we'll post all the information from performance school, but also just all things centered around athlete development and performance at our different social media outlets. We'd encourage everybody to follow that. And then without further delay, what we will do is pass it over to Andy Ryland. Andy is somebody that we as a department and myself personally have respected and looked up to for quite some time. Andy was a Penn State letter winner years back on the football and rugby teams. Right now, he works at USA Football as a senior manager of education and training. And much of his research and conversations revolve around skill development, skill acquisition, practice design, and especially as it relates to teaching athletes how to learn how to deliver and absorb content. So you can see his social media handle here on Twitter as well. And without further ado, Andy, I will pass it over to you, brother. You should have the ability to share your screen as well.
All right, so first off, really appreciate, I guess, you guys having me on, feeling like I'm worth a little bit of your time. So from control to chaos, the idea of technique and skill development for game day is a real passion area of mine. So thank you for the introduction, Dr. Nelly. But yep, 2-sport athlete. I like to tell everybody I had 7 career starts at Penn State, so let's not get carried away. All of them were due to injury as well, so that makes it even better. Like I was that player that, when someone got hurt, I would have to go in the game, but I was never good enough to win the starting spot. I was an All-American in rugby, so that went fairly well. I spent 3 years with the U.S. national team. I played professionally overseas. My studies were in movement science, so a kinesiology background, which really led to a lot of this research when I got into coaching. I'm a former Division I American football coach, currently senior manager of education and training. And then I know everyone hates the whole high performance, but an HP consultant. I work mostly in contact skills. So I do tackling specific with international and professional rugby teams, as well as NFL and college teams. And recently prep for contact, and some skill specialist drill design stuff has come up recently. So things I wanted to talk about are just kind of technique versus skill, focus on the cognitive aspect of skill, and then kind of some thinking on drill design and how it plays out and how we can better prepare our athletes. So instead of citing everything, I'll just kind of give some huge influences. Happy to point things, but I think these are things every coach and every practitioner needs to study. And I think it's a huge point to say multi-theory pedagogy, where so many of us can get stuck in a hole of what we learned back in 2000 or what we learned in our studies, and realizing there is multiple theories out there. And instead of looking at just one and hanging your hat on it, let's make sure we're taking a wide berth. I think every sport coach needs to have a good understanding of motor learning, multi-theory skill acquisition as well. There are multiple schools and multiple conversations around skill acquisition. So I think it's important that we're open to differing views, different thoughts, and we use that as a lens to look at what we do. I've been highly influenced by the OODA loop early on. I have family in the military, and that came back through skill acquisition. But in my experience, it's also been a great way to get to coaches who sometimes aren't always as interested in flashy research and fancy big words, but this idea of how to win a one-on-one battle coming from Boyd's work has been really useful for us. And then exercise classification, a big fan of Bondarchuk's work. And by adding cognitive labels to the traditional exercise classification charts, I think it makes a very clean way to look at technique and skill programming within field and court sports. And so that's been hugely helpful. But I think it's, again, just things all coaches need to be aware of. So kicking it off here, let's go. So I always start with this, and these are two Olympic athletes here. This is a target shooter on the left and a skeet trap shooter on the right. One is going to be highly technical, fundamental based. They're going to get behind their rifle. They go through their checklist. They do everything perfect in a highly controlled environment. In field and court sports, we are much more similar to trap and skeet shooters. Our techniques and our fundamentals will be applied with reaction to an outside stimulus. So we don't always have the time. Now, there are free throws, there are free kicks, there are penalty corners, but most of the time, the application of our technique will come in response to a stimulus, which is often moving at different heights and angles and speeds and requires processing and application within the sports performance field. So our job is, we're creating skeet shooters, and that brings us to the idea of technique versus skill. And I think this is one of the single biggest acknowledgments that any coach or performance group can make, is the idea that these might be two different things, because coaches use them interchangeably 100%. Fundamentals, technique, and skill are often used in the same thing. So if we were to go to the dictionary, we would see that there are different definitions. And I've highlighted some key points, but technique is a method of accomplishing a desired aim. So as a sport coach, we are teaching techniques. We are giving athletes tools in their toolbox to be able to develop and accomplish a desired aim. But the ability to use one's knowledge effectively and readily in execution or performance, especially when we add in context and information processing, becomes the idea of skill. And then dexterity is a huge word within the skill acquisition community about the ability to alter techniques and movement pattern outcomes to fit the situation at hand. So the analogy I believe that Bernstein most famously quoted is that, a key only opens a lock if it's the right key. Every movement problem on the field will be slightly different, and we may need to adjust the technique to match the key to the lock and open up those abilities. So I've always loved this information. If technique is how, if technique is the tool, and skill is our ability to when, where, if, how we apply it on the field, right? Well, what do we do with this model? And I think strength and conditioning has given us a wonderful analogy, which is the difference between change of direction and agility. And I think we'd probably all be familiar with this at this point, but agility and change of direction are not the same thing. Change of direction is pre-planned. It is cones, it is lines, it is ladders. And agility includes the perceptual decision-making in reaction to an outside stimulus. That agility is the ability to find and execute a change of direction technique within the process of looking at finding and exploiting space, or looking at finding and closing space if we're playing offensive and defense. So we look at technique and skill very differently. That skill will have the perceptual decision-making component to it, which will lead us to apply our technique. And then our technique is obviously underpinned by our physical quality. So you can see all those on the right side of the list. We'll be better with our technique if we are more balanced, stronger, more powerful. But we have to get the addition of that perceptual decision-making component. So what does that mean to us? I know what kind of egomaniac posts their own article on a presentation, right? But for us, we use the definition that the ability to read the play environment and or the opponent, select the right technique or technical variation, and implement it to solve the problem is a skillful athlete. So we can have a highly technical athlete, but if they're unable to apply it under chaos by selecting the right technique or technical model, or their decision-making is late, meaning the technique is rushed and loses some of that technical modeling that we think most is associated with high quality execution or winning the play, then we're not a very skillful athlete. The analogy I've often used is a boxer. I can go to a boxing class, I can hit pads and mitts, and my technique can look awesome. As soon as I start to spar, I start throwing wild haymakers and turning into a bar fighter. So I have technique, but I'm overwhelmed by the environment. And all of a sudden that technique breaks down and I become, like I said, just a bar fighter. So I'm not a skilled fighter yet. I simply have the technique of hitting pads or a heavy bag. And that's been a useful analogy for us. So if we push a little forward here, we have to respect the cognitive aspects of skill. And there are people that will get their PhD in skill acquisition, and this is a deep topic, so we're going to keep it high level here. But if skill, and therefore sport performance, has a cognitive aspect, that perception decision-making component, as coaches, we must consider, right, how we incorporate that to create skillful players. Okay, so skill building becomes the process for us of stress inoculation, of taking techniques to representative, and we use the term VDA, the vision decision action cycle, that how am I processing this information? Again, VDA is just a quick coach version of some of the fancier terms, right? To make sure that I'm processing and applying the correct technique or technical variation to become a skilled athlete. Now, one of the first feedbacks from coaches is aren't we already doing this? Our traditional practice has a framework of technique work to small-sided game and group work and to teamwork. And yes, that model is correct. My counter argument is always, why are we waiting for small-sided games and team? Why wouldn't we start layering skill work earlier in the process, especially once we feel that a reasonable technical mastery has been achieved? And so that's where the coach's eye comes in. There are definitely times to work on technique, but if there's a reasonable level of technique mastery, the idea is we can start layering information, decision-making, and processing into our skill building stages before we even get to small-sided games and group works. And that actually allows us as a coach to spend more time in the SSG and team period working on tactical application, because we know our skill development is high quality. If small-sided games and team becomes a co-development tool for both technical and tactical, then we're limiting our ability. So we think we can really speed up this process. How do we speed up the plot process? We start to make sure that our drills include the left side of this diagram, that our skill is being developed by adding perceptual and decision-making activities into our drills, that our drills are not, in the stereotypical traditional sense, are not just technique. But as athletes are ready, we start to expand and grow that platform. So just how important is cognitive aspect in stabilizing technique and allowing it to be used on game day, and what we often see in game day failure? And I always found this interesting. So research on ACL injuries shows us that when athletes perform tasks that stress their attention and decision-making, they often demonstrate biomechanical patterns that are poor and associated with greater risk of injury. So if we look at something like an ACL prevention program, we do our jumps, our sprints, and our exercises in very controlled environments, and our athletes nail them and they look good. By the way, they've also been running and jumping their whole life. All of a sudden, this well-ingrained pattern starts to deteriorate when attention and decision-making is stressed. So now if we look at something like an athlete who's learning a new sport-specific skill, or a coach who's trying to make technical changes to an athlete's performance, what happens when they are thrown in a situation where attention and decision-making are stressed? It stands to reason that those technical abilities will break down the same way basic movement and biomechanical patterns break down, just from the addition of stressing attention and decision-making. And if that happens with highly ingrained patterns, again, you can only imagine the challenge when learning new sporting skills. So whenever we tell coaches that we need to start to add all these new things to their drills, right? Don't panic. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're not saying technique drills are wrong. They certainly have the place, but we can certainly grow them and provide a richer environment. So if our technique drills have gotten us to this point and we've been a successful coach, fantastic. But don't tell me how good we have been. Ask how good we could be if we could improve skill development earlier in the process, or make skill a bigger part of our practice and training variations. So how do we do that? It's pretty simple for me. We have to move from control, which is most often going to be technique, right? Very structured, rigid environments where we're working on movement patterns and technical models of what we think a sporting skill should look like, and we move it to chaos, right? So we want to build technical and tactical proficiency, but we must acknowledge that as a limited shelf life, and the return on investment drops off quickly. So at some point, becoming a better target shooter behind my rifle, very slowly going through my fundamental checklist, stops helping me become a better skeet shooter. I have to face speeds, angles, reaction, and processing to become a better skeet shooter. Early on, my fundamentals of shooting certainly set the platform, but the shelf life is limited. We have to progress. We need to scale the stress, right? We all know about confidence. We all know about failure. We all know about how we move an athlete up through their journey by scaling the stress. For me, I'm probably more aggressive than most, being, again, very influenced by educational pedagogy. We understand that stretch goals are what drive learning. So we need to train on the boundary of our ability, right? If we train on the basics, right? Oh, it's basics. Yes, they have a place, but they have to have the right place in practice. Training on the boundary of our ability is what allows us to create new patterns, new skills, and new tools to solve the problem. Training on the boundary is the only way that we learn. Practices must simulate gameplay. So too much reductionism starts to not mimic the demands of the game and the sporting environment. So we need to find ways to create little slices of the pie. We don't need to feed them the whole pie, right? But we also can't simply give them flour and sugar and ingredient. At some point, we have to give them a piece of the pie that allows them to slowly build, escalate, and scale that stress. And what we want our players to be able to say is, have we been there before? So the idea and the analogy is that our drills and our training needs to prepare athletes for the game day environment. So especially it's much easier to make the analogy with a physical trait, but if all I ever do is block or tackle an opponent that's allowing me to block or tackle them because we're in a structured practice environment, we're working on technique, and all of a sudden I'm facing someone who gets paid $15 million a year to not fall down. I haven't been there before. There is a huge gap between what I've been exposed to and what I'm ready for. and what the game day is asking of me. That robustness is facing challenges that are scaled, because obviously we have to look at health and wellness and total training load, but also allows me to bridge the gap between the practice environment and the game day environment. When those gaps are too big, we have a failure of application. We can find that sweet spot where we can make that bridge. We know we've been there before, and we can find those things. So simple analogy again, because I love analogies, and like all coaches know, analogies are great tools to connect something we know to something we don't know. If I started you at 30,000 feet in an airplane, you would not feel really good about sky jumping or skydiving. But if we look at the scaling the stress analogy here, we start on a 50-foot jump tower, we move to a 250-foot jump tower, then we finally go up and we have to do 5 static line jumps before we're parachute qualified in the military. After that, we can start to do really cool stuff like hey ho and hey low and all these crazy jumps. But it is a definite scaling of stress. And that should be one of the goals of all of our coach development, is how do we scale the stress? So how do we scale stress for skill development? And the one coach, and I always ask every coach I've ever worked with in this HP side of things, is simply, what makes it hard on game day? And is there any of that in your drills? And it can be a really powerful question when you start to reverse and engineer actual sporting skills, but what makes it hard on game day? And too often we remove what makes it hard on game day for the sake of technical modeling and the technique without being able to apply those stresses. And yes, again, those stresses in the coach's eye determines when and where the right amount of stress is applied and how. So things to remember when preparing an athlete from the chaos of the game, and this sometimes is easily forgotten, but it's a great reminder. Your opponent, and I apologize for the typo, is on the field court mat for a reason. He is the best the other team has, okay? It's not going to be easy. They're on scholarship too. They're a talented athlete. They're there for a reason. They get coached too. They're not going to stand there like a log, right? They're not going to let you do exactly what you want to do. In fact, they have probably been specifically taught to counter what you are teaching your athletes. That's what opposition coaches do. And on game day, your opponent's job is to make your life miserable. Your opponent's job is to not let you do the thing that you want to do, which means we have to have variability, we have to have flexibility in our skills, and we have to realize that our skills will have to be performed in imperfect, highly chaotic decisions, which have stressed either our physical abilities, speed, power, movement, or our conceptual abilities, which is reading the play, seeing the correct thing, making the right adjustment in that perception action coupling we talked about on the left side of that original chart. So the most common mistakes that I see, and of course I would never see it from anyone with that beloved Penn State logo on their chest or their hat, but really common mistakes are the idea of everyday drills, which clearly shows a lack of progression and a lack of scaling the stress, okay? We'll talk a little bit later about drills have a life cycle, they have a path, and how we move them through our programming over the course of time. Most progressions of drill work, as we commonly know it, are physical only. So most coaches have talked about crawl, walk, run, right? And we think about, we're going to do it slow, we're going to add speed, we're going to add power, maybe we add distance, but those are all physical additions. Are we layering the cognitive conceptual decisions? So are our drills layering see, think, solve? And if we're not layering that and our progressions are physical only, we're doing well with developing technique, but we're really leaving a lot of skill on the table. One of the low-hanging fruits for skill development is visual scanning. And when coaches try to develop this, and we don't blame them, it's part of the education process, there's a lot of unrepresentative information. So research from agility tells us that reactionary movement drills to things like coaches pointing and whistling, lights and different color cones improves the performance of that task, but does not have a correlation to improve game day performance. So I get better at staying in front of you and reacting when I also learn how to read an opponent, right? Read the situation contextually and stay in front of you. So is the visual scanning and information we are layering into skill development work representative, or is it coaches, lights, and cones? It needs to be realistic information. And again, I think the agility research really backs that up and is something that as a coach, we can steal from to help our programming. And then not enough information to recognize and develop anticipation and pattern recognition. And then the dreaded blame technique or tactics when in fact the error was actually reading of the game. So we see this all the time with a coach yelling at a player for being out of position. There was some tactical misunderstanding in the coach's eyes. What it turns out is they were failing to read the pattern of play on the field and therefore initiate movements to put themselves in the correct position, right? If I fail to read the pattern of play or read my opponent, that perception action coupling, and I don't trigger my technique until too late in the play, the opponent may have already have their hands on me. The opponent may have already started their evasive maneuver. The opponent is now ahead of me in the OODA loop, and my technique fails because I actually didn't trigger it in time. What led to that delay in time was not my technical knowledge. It was the conceptual piece of applying it in time to skill development. And so we often mistake technical tactical errors for technical tactical errors when it's the conceptual component of skill or game that let us down. So the most common ways to stress, the most common stress scale. So how do we layer? How do we take our drills we've always done and add more? How do we make them better? How do we stress scale? So speed and space is very common, but speed and space is normally good for technique stability. So, hey, can I do it in a small space? Can I do it in a big space? Can I do it slow? Can I do it fast? That's that crawl, walk, run analogy. But if the increased space does not come with more degrees of freedom for the opponent, and if the opponent is not allowed to utilize that space to win the drill, then we are simply growing the technique drill and not growing skill. Increases in space and speed should also come with increased opponent degrees of freedom, meaning they can have more jukes, they have more options, they have more tools. We're not limiting it to either or, respond to X or Y, but now they're acting, again, the way an opponent would on game day. Is it representative of what a game day opponent will do? And then adding force to our drills can be a great tool, especially if the force makes us adjust or use a technical variation. So any drills in which there are bumps and pushes or any contact sport, if those bumps and pushes alter my body position or my posture to the point that I have to use a unique technical variation or throws off the timing of my technique, what that's actually doing is developing technical variations and a greater bandwidth of body positions in which I can use that technique, where most often our training is so always started in a perfect position that we've narrowed the bandwidth of where the athlete is comfortable using that technique, instead of being able to apply techniques from those varieties of situations. So other way to scale the stress is obviously with movement, and this gets into our crawl, walk, run analogy. So there's staged movement and there's reactive movement. Most coaches already do an excellent job of adding staged movement to their technique work. Hey, run to this cone, run to this line, do this activity, and then can you come back and still do the technique with inside of the bandwidth of what we think is acceptable? That's great. But reactive movement is the way it happens on the field. And what that does is that takes us from single layer reads to 2-layer reads. And that is hugely important in sport. So if in sport, I only have to watch one person and their activity triggers what technique I need to do, I get really good at a single layer read. If I have to read some sort of movement by the opposition to put myself in the right place, then transition to the attacking opponent, read their intentions and stop their action, now I have a 2-layer read. So an analogy I've always used with this is in any field or court sport when we're throwing a long pass. When do I hit or throw that long pass, right? I'm seeing a teammate streaking down the field, but their relation to the opponent is going to trigger me when to hit or throw that pass. Also, any cover defense on the backside, if they are close or far, determines how much leadway and how far in front I can put the ball. So here we clearly have a 2-layer read of where is the perfect place to put that pass. If all of our drills only have a singular read, right? When they're even, throw the ball, put it out in front so we can go get it. We're not taking into account the cover defense and how my pass might need to be adjusted tighter, wider, deeper, or shallower, or the trajectory of my pass adjusted. So not only do I trigger it at the right time versus the primary defender, but I also place it in the right place for the secondary defender. That becomes a 2-layer read for us, and those great way for us to adjust those movements. And then reactive to a realistic trigger. On game day, what information will I receive from my opponent that will trigger a movement? So if I have to read something to execute a movement, then transition my eyes to execute a skill based on the second or third attacker. Now I'm training eye shift, I'm training realistic triggers of movement and realistic triggers of my technique application. That for us would fall into skill. Reactive movements will promote dexterity, and decision-making based on timing forces me to change my skill. So my ability to do a technique correctly when I get a good read and have plenty of time, or when I get a poor read and I'm out of physical position, or the technique is rushed because of lack of timing, is the definition to us of dexterity, the ability to apply the technical model in a huge variety of situations, both speed, tempo, and body position to correctly execute it. I'm a huge fan that our movements prior to technical execution must get athletes in bad positions, right? So if our movements allow our athletes to stay in good positions all the time, right? The traditional get in a great stance, shuffle in a great stance, stay in the great stance, now execute your technique, fantastic, right? That's awesome for technical proficiency, but it doesn't challenge skill because you will have to reshape. Reshaping for us is the finding of different postures in and around the field. So a good opponent will make you run. You will not always be able to shuffle and stay in good positions. This could be on a volleyball court, or this could be on a huge lacrosse or soccer field, right? Good opponents will make you get into high hip sprint mechanic positions to cover large grounds. Then you're going to have to refine the posture most associated with the skill you're trying to execute. So it could be a block or a tackle. It could be setting a ball. It could be kicking or defending, okay? And then in physical sports, right, good opponents are trained to mangle your posture. They are going to get you out of good positions. Our ability to get back into a quality enough, right, because there's bandwidth, quality enough of position to execute my technique or the technical variation based on my poor position to still win the play. Information, another great easy thing for us to add to the drill. So is the skill being triggered by the right thing? So we ask our coaches, right, what opponent movements, right, what triggers, what things are we looking at? What would dictate me executing this skill? When am I releasing the pass? When am I closing the distance? What things am I reacting to initiate physical movements of closing or opening space, or technical things? So if I'm a setter in volleyball, when am I going to hit a high arc pass, and when is it a low flat trajectory? Well, yes, we have play calls, but my timing to the ball and the approach timing of the hitter will also dictate what is the best pass for that situation. So I have two different triggers for which different pass type I would use. My positioning and timing to the pass, and the hitter's approach timing to the net. Well, if I'm sitting in a situation where coach says high pass, high pass, high pass, low flat, low flat, low flat, my reactions aren't being triggered by game-like information. How many things do I have to look at and take information from? I think eye shifts are one of the easiest and most overlooked and non-coach things within sport. If you take a simple play, most plays will involve 2 to 3 eye shifts, meaning I'm looking at a teammate who has the ball. I'm looking at the space of the defender. Now I'm identifying the open space and working to that open space. While I'm doing that, I'm now shifting my eyes to my teammate with the ball so that I can track the pass. As I'm tracking the pass and I catch it, I'm now transitioning my eyes to who's trying to attack me and tackle me so that I can make an evasive maneuver. A defensive back is reading whether it's run or pass, then he's reading his primary responsibility. Then he's transitioning his eyes to the new player that's in his zone. Then he's shifting his eyes to track the pass and try to intercept it. So 2 to 3 eye shifts are common on every single play. When you look at most technical drills, I am allowed to stare down the singular thing I need to look at, which means it never challenges my perception abilities because my eyes are never transitioning late and I'm not trying to take in multiple sources of information. Well, what happens is what we call is the information hidden. A lot of times in technical drills, there is a reductionist mentality, meaning we actually remove what makes it hard on game day. We give an athlete one thing to look at. So again, it could be volleyball, it could be soccer, it could be football. We say, hey, if this person does this thing, then you have to react this way. So you take all the stimulus and information off the field, you put one player there and you say, follow this player. And when this player makes this attacking line, you cut them off. Okay, that's great. The problem is on game day, we have what we call eye wash, at least in our terminology, which is I may have 5, 6, 9 bodies in front of me, which means there are things that are blocking and hiding my vision. I'm trying to see that one person I'm responsible for, but they are working through traffic. They are working through screens. They are deliberately hiding behind bodies of their teammates. So in a slide attack in volleyball is a great example. If I just have to follow you on the slide, life is easy. If you slide behind 2 of your teammates that are crossing this way and you're crossing behind, now you are challenging my vision to see between the eye wash, right? You look at a free kick in soccer and all the movement and the things, we're trying to hide information behind our teammates, right? Offensive coaches, right? Their entire life is designed around trying to manipulate the defense's eyes, trying to get you to lose sight and lose track of the correct information, to follow wrong information or misleading information. And then their person comes into the open while you're distracted. So if we're not using eye wash, if we're not hiding the information, if we're not using screens and setups and blocks to the vision, you're not preparing them for the game day environment. And these are so easy to add to a very simple technical drill to allow athletes to practice seeing through the shrapnel, seeing through the wash, working through eye wash and finding it. The idea that if we make a mistake, we're going to take everything off the field except for the one thing you have to see is completely counterintuitive, because what makes it hard on game day is seeing that thing through all of the other information and deceit that's on the field. And then opponents. And I think this is really simple, but are the opponents or opponent or opponents, are they acting like what you will face on game day? So do they have the degrees of freedom to win? Or are coaches saying, hey, do one thing? Now, is there a time and a place to do one thing? Absolutely, especially early in the learning process. But pretty soon we have to start adding layers, right? And we'll see coaches that, okay, I'm going to stand behind the drill and I'm going to tell the attacker to go right or left. And it feels good because now we have 2 degrees of freedom, but we're still just running on a straight line. And the opponent doesn't have the game day freedom to say, well, if you took a bad angle, I'm just going to beat you inside. because for the sake of the drill, we're going to make sure that it works out perfectly once we get to the cone. So the degrees of freedom are limited. Also, I think adjustments are a huge thing to consider. Again, your opponent gets coached too. So coaches will say like, well, this opponent always does X. Well, if midway through the first quarter of the game, opponent is doing X and you are clearly whooping their rear end, their coach is going to have them make an adjustment. And suddenly they're going to be using a different technique, or maybe they're going to adjust their alignment. Maybe they're going to be wider or tighter or shallower or deeper, depending on your sport. But your opponent will adjust based on your successes and failures in games. So drills should allow for adjustments and our ability to apply skills over a greater range than just that 1 yard box, right? In a 3x3 box, we should be able to execute any skill. If you're in front of the box, in the back of the box, on the inside of the box or the outside of the box, I need to be able to adjust my footwork and adjust my technical application to anywhere in that space. Why? Because our opponents will adjust. Yes, they may generally be aligned right in that place, but your previous performance will change their alignment so that they can accomplish their task. And then are your opponents trying to win? So if we reverse engineer the problem, again, what makes it hard on game day? Use the example because it's really blatant in my core skills. But if what makes tackling hard on game day is you're paid $15 million to not fall down because you're an NFL running back, doing drills in which we're tackling a 6-pound plastic foam shield that falls down every time we touch it is not preparing us for the challenges of game day. If resisted drive and physically moving another human being is your task on game day, unresisted drive work isn't preparing us for the stress as it most comes. And we can do the same thing with any evasive tracking dodge action in a sport. When there is evasive tracking action, your opponent is trying to win. If your teammate is not trying to win on game day, you're getting a very watered down version. And then what will you know on game day? So the idea that a coach says, okay, in this drill, the player's either going to go inside or outside. Well, that's a good stepping stone. But again, as we progress, you're not going to know on game day that your opponent is going to go inside or outside. They may go inside, they may go outside, they may try to run right through you. They also may go backwards. They have 360 degrees of freedom. So when we limit them at first, it's important for the learning process, but we quickly need to expand the options the opponent has, and those options should mimic them on game day. It's normally not an either or on game day. There's normally 5 or 6 options, and we don't know what they're going to be. So when you constrain the drill by saying you're going to get X or you're going to get Y, we're actually narrowing the focus of information the player needs, and therefore they can apply it much more readily, right? 2 choices is easier than 6 choices. It's why kids menu at McDonald's has so few choices. They're not very good at making decisions and processing information. Adults are. We grow and we scale the stress. Simple question that we ask all of our coaches. When you look at a drill, is it showing that the athlete knows what you want them to do? Or is there enough information and stress that it is showing they can do it under representative information processing stress? And that's a huge dichotomy, right? When we limit the activities, when we can really control them, right? When the constraints are super tight, we often just show, okay, the player knows what I want. The player knows the technical model. But if there's not enough degrees of freedom or enough information, I don't know if they can do it in a game-like situation. Yes, you can wait for your team period to find that out. But again, why not speed up the process, especially with athletes that have shown technical mastery and are grown through our drill progression. Again, we're always working at the edge, and we want to render them as quick as possible. So staff workshop questions, things that I would ask when we're designing drills with any sport are, we take any skill, we say what physical movements most often precede the skill, and are those physical movements included in our drill progression? And I'm huge into progression. So you start with stationary skill, but then we want to start layering on the most common movements, right? Once they can do an activity with the most common movements, I want to know what is the visual trigger that leads to that movement. So now we're adding the first layer of decision-making. I have to read some action that triggers a movement. I move to the spot, I execute a technical skill. Beautiful. Next progression. What visual or physical proprioceptive trigger initiates the technique, right? So the physical proprioceptive will often be for our contact skills, visual for other sports. But once I have a trigger that leads to a movement, and then I get to a spot, what triggers my technique? So now I have layered in that double information read. What are the most common eye patterns? How many eye shifts? Do I need to layer in more eye shifts, more information? Will my athlete have clear lines of sight, or will eye wash be present within the techniques and games we are playing? Are the opponents in the drills trying to win? And again, these questions, the answers to these questions will form your progression. So at some point, the opponent will be giving you a look and not trying to win. At some point, they will be decisively trying to win. At some point in your progression, you'll have clear lines of sight. At some point, eye wash. And skill to skill, sport to sport, how you layer these will be different, but they will always be layered in some form or fashion. And then at what point do we allow the performers to use deception? So is our attacking player using deception to try to win, or is it going to be straight line speed based in our action to win? So once you do this, you can quickly and very easily start to build out, okay, these are the movements, these are the triggers, these are the technique triggers, these are the eye patterns, here's eye wash versus clear line of sight. Now I have 6 or 7 items, and I program that into my progression. So now I have stationary passing, I have passing with movement, I have passing with movement in reaction to an opponent or a teammate. I have passing with movement in reaction to an opponent or teammate, right? And then I have the second pass in relation to a second stimulus. Then I start layering eye wash and eye transitions. Then I start allowing the defense to try to deliberately win and to deceive me by faking up, back, forth, changing the spaces, making me read those things. And instantly I have a drill progression. So what is our drill life cycle? So once we have a drill progression, we want to get through our life cycle as fast as possible. If you are doing the same drill week 8 as you are doing week 1, are your players getting any better? And I would say no. Right? The idea that one drill can work with a collegiate athlete for 8 straight weeks is probably a fallacy. They've achieved a level of mastery that they are ready for new stress. Or maybe we recruited the wrong player, but that's another story, right? We use everyday skills as opposed to everyday drills. Our skill goal is the same every day, but our activity is always based on the current level and needs of the performer. So that goes to working on the edge. Once we've reached that edge and achieved some level of mastery, we're going to layer more information and more from our progression. My personal goal is to render my own drills too easy as fast as humanly possible. I don't want to be stuck doing a drill, right? Oh, this is my drill, the old standby. I want it to be too easy and the athletes to have a level of mastery as fast as humanly possible so I can start to layer more skill building into it. Learning only happens on the edges of what we're capable of. Otherwise, we're simply proving what we can already do. And the basic program for us is we have a focused teaching block, and that's normally when we're introducing something new. You know, that's going to be the slower, the walk through, the demonstration. We're introducing a new concept and a new activity. Then we get to the guided repetition block where we may be able to say, hey, we're doing X drill. Everyone knows what it is. We jump in, but coaches are paying a lot of attention. There's a lot of cues and feedback. We're guiding them through that initial learning process. Once we've achieved some level of mastery, we get into our partner and group work block, where I, as a coach, don't need to be overseeing each and every rep. Players have some sort of conscious incompetence where they understand where their problems are and they can begin to self-correct, and they can start doing it in groups, in small sessions with a partner. And once we really feel like we have a drill mastered, it goes into our warm-ups. We do things as part of the warm-ups or you're on your own pre-practice periods that allows coaches the ability to get the repetitions of certain movement patterns they think are very beneficial, but without stealing time from formal practice that we could be using the guided repetition block for new skills that might need more guidance. I, as a coach, don't want to waste my time in a guided repetition block of a simple pass and catch drill if my players have an acceptable level of mastery. And again, that is a judgment call by the coach. If they have an acceptable level of mastery, they can do that work on their own. They can do it with a partner. And my focus as a coach is on the edge with that new skill where the guidance is needed. Sorry, this didn't come out very well when I copied and pasted in, but you'll see kind of the sequencing of models and the stages of practice here. And I've liked this chart, but guided practice is going to be at the beginning. Teachers and coaches will need to provide guidance on initial attempts to make sure that the athletes are building confidence and they're not making too many errors. Also, most of the time with something new, athletes are struggling to know what their error is. So they may need your guidance. They may need your cueing, okay? Once we've obtained a high success rate, this chart uses 80. I believe research out of Arizona State says that between 73 and 83% is the optimal learning rate. So you should have about 20% failure, right, for optimum learning. Once we get above that threshold, then there's no need for me to oversee it anymore. I'm wasting my coaching time on something that the athletes have a dependent of mastery. That's when we move to independent practice. Independent practice for us is going to be with a teammate or in a small group, right, where assistant coaches and head coaches can float around, but we don't need to be drilled in, right? And I think what's really important is that athletes need, right, extensive independent practice in order for skills and knowledge to become automated. If I am in a situation where I'm having to be guided through each and every repetition, if every correction has to come from an outside source, I will never automate that technique. Automation happens when I can now feel and self-correct, and that's going to take some level of independent practice, right? And on my own work where I do feel correct without the coaches, because that's how it's going to happen on game day. So to use sports analogies, because I'm silly like that, if we're in our post-game locker room after my quick talk, right, things I think everyone should think about: respect the difference between technique and skill. If our drills are limiting the cognitive aspect within the situation, if the cognitive aspect, which is telling the athlete when, where, and if to use a particular technique, don't be surprised when they incorrectly apply techniques on game day, because none of the triggers and none of the perception action coupling has been trained. Focus on the fundamentals. Yes, every coach loves that. Focus on technique. Yes, every coach does that, but do so at a level that mirrors the player's development. So a catch pass is not just a catch pass. Catch pass drill can go from here to eternity with thousands of layered variations that provide more difficulty and more context to it. So getting back to the fundamentals of catch pass for an advanced group of athletes might look like a really unique high-level drill with multiple players, because that's where they're at. We don't need to revert back to juvenile level drills unless there is a severe problem in technical issues that fall outside the bandwidth of what we think is appropriate. Otherwise, we need to evaluate. Remember, were the technical errors caused by processing issues that artificially sped up or slowed down or rendered the technique rushed to the point that it was not able to be executed? And then we need to stress inoculate our athletes through a drill progression that is going to layer movements, triggers, vision and scanning, distractions, and opposition with growing degrees of freedom. And I know that's kind of general, but thinking about an all sports approach, these would be areas that I would try to add to drills, regardless of sport and regardless of technique, to build a progression. The progression would be slow to fast, simple to complex. But again, the aggressiveness is in working on the edge, proving it too easy, and then moving on to the next progression as fast as humanly possible. Each and every year with each group of students, you will start at a different place, and by the end of the year, you will end at a different place based on that group of athletes and how they take to the skill, the quality of training, their education level, all those previous things. But the goal always remains the same. We don't want to be doing the same activities at the end of the year that we did at the beginning, because our skill development has gotten to the point that we can add more and more and more of these things in each and every activity. So I tried to be fast. I know I covered a lot of information. Happy to take any questions. I want to say a huge thank you as a Penn State guy. This is one of the coolest things I've ever done. There's my information. I know Dr. Nelson already covered some of it, but I want to give a special thanks to you guys for thinking to reach out to me and have a little chat here. So if there's any questions or anything I can clarify, go deeper in, because I was trying to mind our time here. Happy to do so now.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm not coach. I'm in academia in athlete training, sport medicine, but I'm interested in how you present this and skills development, all those, and how you can teach athletes that even simple skill and techniques, but try to create the intensity those like a moment that they potentially experience in the game day, but simple drills sometimes they don't feel like this is simple, so they don't pay attention to how they feel in the game day, but to just create something that they self-talk or whatever to motivate them to actually create in the head. How can do that kind of environment to actually do simple skills like session, but just how can create that kind of things to because the game day hopefully can perform, but then if they don't practice that kind of moment, that things to do, how can create as a coach to actually train?
Yeah,
them?
no, it's great question. And my answer would be, I think a lot of it is in the structure. So if the opponent in the drill doesn't have enough degrees of freedom to win the drill, or they're not encouraged to win the drill, the level of effort and intensity you're going to get from the opponent renders the actor, right, working at a much lower intensity because they know what's coming, right? It's easy to do. I don't have to worry about getting beat. As soon as the degrees of freedom of the opponent open up, now the focus has to be clued in, because there's multiple things I'm paying attention to, and there's multiple ways I can lose the drill. It's funny, I tell people almost jokingly, but the number one cue I tell the opponent, right, and I'm using that generically in a drill, the number one cue I tell the opponent is win. If the opponent is not motivated or attempting to win, the level and intensity of the drill will by default start to come down, right? Because there's no motivation, there's no challenge, it's easy. As soon as the opponents are trying to win, right, and even in a friendly way, right? Sometimes we think competition has to be like, tough and gruff and everything, but games of capture the flag or get across the line in some sort of dodge evasion game for soccer or lacrosse or whatever, when somebody wins and loses and people are cheering and they're having fun and they're laughing and there's a little bit of trash talk, the intensity ratchets up immediately. But it's human nature. If I don't have the degrees of freedom to win, what sort of effort am I going to put into the drill? I know that I'm confined to this box. I'm only allowed to run one direction. I'm going to go to the right side and they're going to cut me off, blah, blah, blah. So I think the structure and the encouragement of that naturally ratchets up the intensity. And then obviously the culture and the fun of it goes a long way. So, whether it's simple things like I said, just a little fun, some laughing, a little trash talking, whether it's, we've done things like, you make bets on the activity and the losing team has to sing I'm a Little Teapot at the end of it, right? And do a little dance or whatever. Like you just add something to it that can make it fun. But number one thing, degrees of freedom and the ability to actually win.
Thank you.
Hey, Andy, going back to your comment and your example you used on tackling the hand shield or the pad versus tackling a human being that's trying to beat you. How do you, like, for certain situations like that in terms of contact, tackling, or any other types of game day like skills, do you expose athletes to that, but do it in a way that limits risk of injury? Right. But then also, right, you have to expose them to that in order to develop that skill and also build tolerance right? But you also don't want to put them in position where they could, a risky situation where they could potentially get hurt in practice and then they're unavailable for the game because the drill or the contact situation was game-like.
Yeah, so here I use a tool that we call packaging. And so that it's going to be a multi-drill package that covers all the bases. So if I'm looking at a tackling drill, let's say versus a shield, and we'll say a player behind the shield to be very specific. So now I feel like I'm getting resisted contact and I'm getting resisted leg drive if the player holding the shield is giving me like a little bit of stress, right? So I feel good about my resisted strike and my resisted leg drive. But with the shield in between, I know that I'm not getting complete work on clamp and control, that upper body grapple, and I know that I'm not getting work on finishing it to the ground. So I know that somewhere during the day or during the week, I need to also program, maybe it's a crash mat drill where I'm going to get the work to finish to the ground. And then maybe I'm going to do a start pre-engage so there's no collision, but we're going to allow the runner to try to escape so that I'm getting some upper body clamp and grapple and control of another human being. So it's difficult especially in the football culture, but what we do is we try to examine each drill very specifically. What am I getting out of it? And what are we not getting out of it? And so we say, okay, player to player angle tackle versus a shield. I'm getting this. I need to supplement it with some player to player control grapple work. And we definitely are going to need some finish work. And so if my package of drills can cover all those bases, we can do it. And then it gets even worse, or I shouldn't say worse, but if we're doing, like the standalone guys just holding up a pad or a dummy or a shield, well, now I'm getting unresisted contact and I'm not getting leg drive, right? Maybe I'm getting shoulder accuracy if we're doing it really well. Okay, so this drill only covered shoulder accuracy. So I need to make sure I find a way for them to get some resisted leg drive. Maybe we're going to go use the sled. I also need to make sure that we get some finish work. Maybe we're going to use a grapple game, or maybe we're going to use a crash mat. Week to week, we'll change it up, right? So it's always looking at it from the totality and then breaking it down. What's our package going to look like this week? Oh, shoot, we had a bad week and coaches want to smash them on Tuesday. Okay, well, we checked every box. So now, we can go back and kind of piecemeal some little things like maybe an accuracy drill, because we definitely got a lot of physical battle on that heavy Tuesday. Does that kind of make sense or answer it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of where my head went. It's like, okay, I feel like sometimes if you are working on tackling or contacting, you're doing it against an unresisted bag, it's probably to preserve that and put the athlete at less risk of potential, physical injury, right? So that way they'll be available for game day. But it is important to expose them to that because they are going to experience it. So it's just like I was just curious on how.
Yeah.
That and
I think there's some unique ways to do that. Like you said, you can start players pre-engaged. So you have like a really heavy drive-based battle that's going to work resisted leg drive and positioning, but without any collision. So all of our pre-engaged drills, we call them high force, low impact. So maybe our impact work is versus something that's unresisted, but I need to supplement it with resisted. I'm still worried about injury, so let's start them pre-engaged, right? And now we can battle and do positioning and resetting our hips and all that kind of stuff. Okay, cool. I'm happy with that there. We've checked the boxes. We've painted the full picture via the package.
I got a question for you. One of your key points was that learning kind of happens on the edge, where they're really pushing their skill. Do you have any thoughts on, like, if you're introducing a new drill or skill to them, how much failure is too much failure in that drill, and how much is basically not enough? Like, when do you pull back or when do you move on to the next one? Because there's probably going to be a reasonable amount of failure if you're pushing them.
Yeah. So here challenging question, and here's why. Early on, there's going to be a higher rate of failure, and especially like we'll say the first 3 or 4 reps. And I've always found this really interesting that a coach does a great job teaching a drill, but if it's something new, even with an elite level athlete, how many repetitions does it take to sort out those words into physical actions in my own body? So maybe it takes me 4 or 5 reps just to figure out how to act out the words that the coach said, or even if maybe we watched a video of players from last year doing the drill, right? So I have these visuals and I have these words, but I got to turn it into movement in my own body. And that takes some reps. So often after the first rep of a drill, you've seen it, coaches like jump in and start to completely re-explain it and never give athletes a chance to sort it out. Now, that said, at some point after they've had 3, 4, maybe 5 reps, if they're clearly not getting it, then there's a chance to step in. The hardest part about that is there's a mixture between, obviously, the teaching and education of the coach plays into an impact versus the ability of the athlete. So like, what if we just taught the drill really poorly versus what if I overshot too much stimulus? And so that's where I say, like, that's where the art and the science of it is you know what the 2 major causes of it are, but like your coach's eye has to be able to go back and forth and say, you know what, I need to stop and reteach this, or shoot, I overshot this. I think the other thing is, you know, if you look at like some of the research on blocked versus serial versus random practice, you know, it's like, well, hey, we really got this, right? Because by the end of the 10-minute session, everybody was doing it perfect. Well, can they do it again the next day? Can they do it again next week? Like, was the learning sticky? And so I'm a big believer. I'm a little more random. I'm 100% a whole part whole guy, not a part whole guy. I think that allows me to troubleshoot a lot. So I like to do a complex stress inoculation drill whole first, and then I'm watching where the breakdowns are. And then if we do some structured blocked work on technique, it's going to be based off of what happened in the complex drill, and then we're going to go back to the complex drill. So that whole part whole for me is much more powerful, and I think the literature supports it, is much better than part whole as far as teaching. And then it allows you, to your point, if you think you may have overshot it, but you can revamp and cover some of it in the part aspect, and then give it another try and see if there's improvement. If there's improvement when you use that style, normally you can keep going. If you use a whole part whole method and the second whole doesn't show any improvement, there's a pretty good chance you overshot it. But that's how I do it, and not every coach does it. So I know those aren't great answers. But like I said, a lot of the research, you know, says that like optimum learning, you know, is somewhere between, like I said, I've seen anywhere from like 73 to 83, so like 75 to 80%. But for most coaches, the idea that 1 in 5 is a failure is like, you know, the perfect practice mantra. That can be very challenging, but you have to work on that edge. Now, I will say too to this, because you talked about failure and hurting confidence. I definitely program my weekly like microcycle with like work days and sharpen days. So like in a traditional college football environment, Tuesday and Wednesday are the work days. And an analogy I really like, because I think you have to tell the athletes that they're going to fail, and I'm not going to absolutely rip you a new one, like we're going to work through this together, is we say it's riding the bike. Hey, remember when you learned to ride a bike? You had to put your foot down, you wobbled, you actually fell a couple times, you skinned your knee. Today we're learning to ride the bike. Like, we're pushing it. We're going to learn. And then on sharpen days, also because the cognitive stress is stress, and you guys know this better than anybody. So there's more stress in that drill than a little more sterile drill. So on a sharpen day, we may do some technique work because we're limiting the cognitive load, we're limiting the total load. And a lot of athletes like some technique work to kind of center themselves and feel good going into the game day. So on a work day, we ride the bike. On a sharpen day, we're going to do some technique, like, you know, feel it in our own body, feel really good about it going into the weekend. So that's kind of how we'll undulate it. So not every day is an on the razor's edge day. Some days we're gonna back down and just sharpen those things so you feel good about it. And I do like that from a load management standpoint as well. Ride the bike days, it can be big cognitive load, decision making, 20% rate of failure. A Thursday, Friday sharpen day, you know what I mean? Like if 1 out of 10 people messes it up, I'm like, come on, fellas, like let's go. You know what I mean? Like these are simple. Get your feet right. It's all it is. It's a simple little thing. Let's go. So you do want to. I personally do undulate it.
When revisiting some of those foundational skills, how do you strategically go back to some of those things, right? So is it more of a thing where based on some of the more complex stuff you're doing, if you're seeing some gaps in those skills, do you then go back, be like, okay, we did this 2 months ago, we haven't done it in a while, but we're going to reintroduce it because this is what I'm seeing? Or is it more strategic and programmed out in some of those daily skills or foundational and level?
Great question. It's, for me, I'm a highly reactionary coach. One of my favorite lines of all time is your players write the practice plan. You just watch them and fill in the gaps. They tell you what they need. You know what I mean? Like they tell you what they need. And so you do the activities, you do that. Now, like I said, we do like some of those rote memorization, more entry level skills. We do them every day. It's just part of the warm up. Like they're getting there, like say, I don't know, like punching a shield or catching a pass or taking like a drop. Like we'll use football for the example. I'm not wasting collegiate or NFL individual time doing a pass drop. Like those players are well beyond that. If they need my guidance on that, like we're in trouble. Like that's part of their pre-practice or that's part of their warm-up. What I don't want it, and there's a time and a place for this, but individual period normally turns into a position-specific warm-up instead of a skill-building period. If today is targeted as a skill-building period, then we're going to hit those rote mechanics as part of our warm-up or as pre-practice. And so we've used a system. I stole this from the South African rugby team where we call it prescriptive pre-practice, where each coach with his position group gives his players 2 or 3 drills or activities that he wants them to do pre-practice. So instead of pre-practice turning into extra individual, every player is working on their own personal deficiencies. So I've a linebacker room. I have 10 guys. Each week I write down each 10 guys' names. I give each guy 3 drills. I say, I want you to get between 5 and 10 reps of these pre-practice. Grab a partner, hit it up. Like, so you have a personalized prescription for some of those rote things that I want you to work on, because when we get to Indy, we're trying to work on growing some new skills. And that's been really useful. And the players love it because you're showing complete commitment to their personal development and some individualization. So you're going, okay, I'm taking drops, right? But player X is working mesh and player Y is working throwing the deep ball because that's the extra work he needs, instead of, okay, all linemen come over here. When I talk to coaches, I say, like, I guarantee you all 5 of your starting offensive linemen don't have the same strength, the same weakness. If they're always doing the same drill, how are you correcting their strong and weak points? So we got to find a way to do some of that. So we'll just sneak the reps in like I said, in those pre-practice and those early and warm up. I think, warm up is a great time to just get some position specific movement in, low intensity, but you're accumulating the volume that traditional coaches want to see for some basic movement patterns.
Awesome. Thank you.
Andy, man, this is awesome as always.
Well, I hope some of it was useful and I didn't waste your time. Like I said, I was pretty thrilled. My wife was freaking fired up. She's a volleyball alum, has her championship rings. I don't. She likes, that's good dinner table talk. So it was pretty cool for us. So I hope somebody found something useful, or there was a thought or two that can be explored.
Yeah, definitely. Every time we talk to you, man, we come away with a bunch of notes and more questions. And I'm sure we'll talk about it even more here amongst our staff. And we recorded this, so if you're okay with it, we typically just put it on our YouTube page, kind of unlisted. And then as coaches, we meet with the head coaches and support staff, strength staffs, everything like that. As appropriate, we send it to those different groups and just kind of scale it out that way. So if you're okay with it, we'll do that.
No secrets, man. It's just sports.
Awesome. That sounds good. Well, shoot, man, really appreciate the time. And if there's anything that we can do to help or do for you, please let us know. Okay.
Oh, no doubt. Like I said, I appreciate it, and I will promise you the next time I get out there, though, you guys are all on the stop by list. So we'll hang out and have a coffee.
Let's do it. Let's make that happen for sure. Let us know when you're in town.
No doubt. Appreciate you, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. Take care now.
Thanks,
Thank
Andy.
you.